Ever wish you could speak a language that's a bit, well, different?
Different is putting it mildly.
Get ready to have your mind tickled by Latvian.
A language that's small in speaker numbers, sure, but huge EE in personality.
QGE is right. Today's deep dive takes us into the heart of Latvian.
Exploring its ancient roots, its incredible journey through history, and some
of its truly fascinating linguistic quirks, I'd say.
What's so captivating about Latvian is that it's anything but ordinary. It's like a
linguistic time capsule.
Yes, exactly. Holding clues to a much bigger puzzle of language evolution.
Especially within that Indo-European family, right?
Absolutely. See, Latvian belongs to a branch known as the East Baltic languages.
Nestled within the larger Balto-Slavic family.
Yeah.
Okay, so we're talking about its linguistic relatives.
Precisely. It links back to Lithuanian, obviously, and more distantly to, well,
familiar faces like Russian and Polish.
Right. But here's where it gets really cool. Latvian has a bit of a rebellious streak, you see.
Rebellious, huh? How so?
It's undergone some, shall we say, more dramatic changes than its linguistic siblings.
Borrowing a bit from its neighbors along the way.
Exactly. Think Finnish, Estonian. It's really taken bits and pieces from everyone.
Borrowing. It sounds like Latvian is the life of the linguistic party. So what kind of influences are we talking about specifically? Give us the details.
Well, take that iconic Latvian first syllable stress. That's a clear fingerprint of its Finno-Ugric influences.
So that's what gives it that distinct sound.
It adds a certain, how should I put it, musicality to the language, wouldn't you say?
Totally. I can already hear it in my head. But before we get carried away, let's rewind the clock a bit. Where did this whole Latvian story begin?
Fasten your seatbelts, because we're going way back.
Okay. I'm ready for a linguistic joyride.
Linguists estimate that around 400 to 600 CE, the ancestor of Latvian branched off from the rest of the East Baltic languages.
Okay, so that's when things started to get interesting.
Then, after 800 CE, Latvian and Lithuanian decided to part ways, forging their own paths.
A classic sibling rivalry just playing out over centuries. So how did we get from those early forms of Latvian to the language we know today? Were there ancient Latvian dictionaries hidden in caves somewhere?
Not quite. This is where Latvian's story gets intertwined with the history of the region itself.
Okay, now we're talking. I love a good historical twist.
Picture the 13th century. The ancient Latgalians, who already spoke a form of Latvian, started assimilating neighboring Baltic tribes. We're talking Curonians, Semi-Gallians, Salonians.
Wow, it was like a linguistic melting pot.
Exactly. Historical events like the Livonian Crusade and the formation of medieval Livonia played a huge role in shaping this linguistic blend.
So Latvian wasn't just a language, it was a reflection of the political landscape.
Precisely. It's fascinating how language reflects those power dynamics, isn't it?
Absolutely. But how did Latvian go from being this spoken blend to having a written form? There must have been a moment when it finally appeared on paper.
You're right. And that moment arrived in the 1530s.
The suspense is killing me. What was the first written text? Was it some epic poem passed down through generations?
As exciting as that would be, it was actually a translation.
A translation of what? Don't leave me hanging.
The Lord's Prayer by a German pastor named Nicholas Rahm. Not quite as glamorous, I'm afraid.
Hey, you know what they say, humble beginnings. But I can imagine it's like opening the door for a whole new era of Latvian literature. So, what came next?
Well, the oldest preserved Latvian book we have is a Catholic catechism from 1585. It's carefully stored all these years later in the Uppsala University Library in Sweden.
Wow, that's incredible that something from so long ago still exists.
It's amazing how these artifacts survive through the ages, right?
It really is. It speaks to how much people valued preserving their language, even back then.
Absolutely.
It seems like religion played a huge role in Latvian's early development, at least in its written form.
Absolutely. We can't forget Johann Enskluk, a German Lutheran pastor who, in the late 1600s, took on the monumental task of translating the entire Bible into Latvian.
The entire Bible. Wow, talk about dedication. That must have been a massive undertaking.
It was.
Did that help Latvian gain more recognition?
It definitely contributed. However, the real champion of secular Latvian literature was Gotthard Friedrich Stender.
Okay, so this guy's a big deal.
He was like the rock star of Latvian language in the 1700s.
A linguistic rock star. I like it.
Dictionaries, grammar books, even the first illustrated Latvian alphabet book, published in 1787.
This guy was busy.
He was laying the groundwork for a thriving literary scene.
He sounds like a true visionary. So by the 19th century, we've got Latvian appearing in print, the Bible's translated, grammar books are popping up, things are looking up for the language.
They are, they are. But of course, language is never static, is it?
Always evolving, right?
As Latvian entered the 19th century, it encountered new challenges,
Oh, like what?
particularly from the influence of German. You see, it was the language of the Baltic German upper class.
Ah, the age-old story of language and power dynamics. So what happened? Did anyone stand up for Latvian during this time?
That's where the first Latvian national awakening comes in.
Okay, tell me more.
In the mid-19th century, a group known as the Young Latvians emerged,
Young Latvians. I like the sound of that already.
passionate about promoting Latvian and pushing for its wider use and standardization.
So they weren't afraid to fight for their language.
Exactly. But I'm guessing not everyone was thrilled about this resurgence of Latvian pride.
Yeah, I was just thinking that myself. There had to have been some pushback.
You're catching on. The late 1800s saw the rise of Tsar Alexander III.
Uh-oh.
This doesn't sound good.
And with him, a wave of Russification policies.
So Latvian found itself back in a struggle.
Latvian found itself in a struggle for survival, competing with Russian for dominance.
How did Latvian weather that storm? Did it manage to hold its own?
Hold its own, it thrived. A census in 1897 revealed something remarkable. Latvian was the most spoken language in both the Governorate of Courland and the Governorate of Livonia.
Wow, talk about resilience. Latvian's journey through the 19th century sounds like a real roller coaster. It certainly was a tumultuous time. Latvian entered the 20th century, and, well, let's just say it was ready for its close-up.
It's close-up. What do you mean?
Well, remember those German influences we talked about?
Right, from the previous century.
Exactly. In 1908, big year, Latvian got a serious orthographic makeover.
A makeover, like a whole new wardrobe.
Exactly. Out with the old, in with the new. And we have linguists Carlis Millenbaz and Janis Enzelins to thank for it.
Okay, so these guys are like the fashion designers of Latvian linguistics.
You could say that. They created the modern Latvian alphabet.
Wow, so out with that old German influence system. And in it with a more streamlined system?
A streamlined, phonetically aligned way to see Latvian on the page.
It's like they gave Latvian a whole new voice. But, languages are sneaky, right?
Oh, tell me about it. They never stay put.
Always evolving, changing.
Always. Which brings us to the 20th century and all those linguistic adventures, shall we say.
Adventures? Okay, I'm intrigued. What kind of adventures did Latvian have?
Well, I suppose we have to address the elephant in the room. Or should I say the bear in the forest?
The bear. Okay, you've got me on the edge of my seat. What bear are we talking about?
The Soviet era, of course, and you guessed it, the return of Russification policies.
Right, of course. A tense time for so many languages and cultures under Soviet rule. So how did Latvian fare? Give us the details.
Well, the Soviet Union's policies definitely had a significant impact.
Significant how?
Well, for one, Russian became the language of, administration and education.
Oh, so Latvian was pushed aside.
In many ways, yes. And we can't forget about the tragic events of the 1937-38 Latvian operation.
Right, of course.
And those deportations in the 1940s, not to mention the influx of Russian speakers, which drastically changed the linguistic landscape, really.
So by the time we get to the late 20th century, how is Latvian doing?
Well, by 1989, only about 52% of Latvia's population spoke Latvian as their native language.
Wow. That's a pretty stark reminder of how fragile a language's existence can be.
It is, especially amidst all that political turmoil.
Right. But then, of course, came Latvian independence in 1991.
Yes. A pivotal moment.
So that changed things for Latvian, I imagine.
Absolutely. With independence came this powerful wave of revitalization. Imagine the feeling of reclaiming your language after decades of suppression.
I bet. So Latvian was reinstated as the sole official language.
You got it.
But with a significant Russian-speaking population at that point, how did they approach that transition? Did everyone suddenly have to become fluent in Latvian?
It was a delicate balance. They wanted to promote the national language while also respecting the rights of its diverse population.
Oh, of course. Make everyone feel included.
Exactly. So they opted for an inclusive approach.
Yeah.
Integration.
So instead of shutting people out, they invited them in.
Exactly. They implemented things like bilingual education programs.
Oh, interesting.
And of course, Latvian became essential for a lot of professions.
Right. So it was practical, but not forceful.
Precisely. They viewed knowing Latvian as, empowering.
I like that. Creating a society where everyone has the opportunity to learn the language.
Absolutely. But as you can imagine, revitalizing a language isn't always easy.
What were some of the challenges they faced?
Well, time was a big one, for starters.
Right, because you can't just expect things to change overnight.
Exactly. And resources, obviously. But there was also another challenge, a big one.
Oh, what was that?
The overwhelming presence of, well, of English.
Ah, yes, English, a global language.
Right. Latvian was caught between these global giants.
Linguistic battle of the titans.
You could say that.
So how did they handle that? How do you even begin to compete with Russian and English, both such dominant languages?
Creativity. That was key.
Yeah.
Organizations like the Terminology Commission.
They focused on coming up with Latvian equivalents for common words in Russian and English, so actively expanding the language rather than just letting those loanwords take over. Interesting. Were people on board?
Not always.
Yeah.
You see, there's this big debate about what to call, of all things, the euro.
The euro. What was the issue?
The Terminology Commission, remember them? They proposed era, or heirs.
Garo or heirs. Those sound, I don't know, authentically Latvian.
Right. But the European Central Bank, they insisted on euro.
Euro. Interesting. I guess it just goes to show you how much cultural weight language really carries. So after all of this, has the revitalization been successful? Is Latvian thriving in the 21st century?
It's a real testament to their efforts. Remember that 2009 survey we mentioned earlier?
Oh, right. About the Russian speakers in Latvia.
Well, 56% of native Russian speakers reported having a good knowledge of Latvian.
That's incredible.
And among those aged 17 to 25, the number shot up to 64%.
Wow. That's a testament to their approach for sure.
Mm-hmm.
So we've talked about its history, its survival against the odds, but now let's talk about what makes Latvian so special. Let's dive into its unique features, its intricate structure. First up, Latvian grammar. Okay, so we've journeyed through Latvian's history.
Witnessed its resilience, absolutely.
But now let's get our hands dirty with the language itself.
Let's dive right in.
What's lurking beneath the surface of this fascinating tongue?
Well, Latvian grammar, it's like a
beautifully crafted puzzle.
yes, complex yet elegant.
I like it.
It's a classic Indo-European system, of course.
Of course.
With inflections and derivations.
Right. Inflections, derivations. You're speaking my language. Well, not my language yet, but you know what I mean.
I think so.
Can we break those down a bit for our listeners? I mean, not everyone out there is fluent in, linguistic lingo.
Absolutely. Imagine inflections as those little tweaks we make to words to signal their role in a sentence.
Okay.
English does this a little. With plurals, add an S to cat. And, well, you got cats.
Right.
Latvian takes this to a whole new level.
How so?
We're talking changing nouns, adjectives, even verbs. It's like a grammatical dance across the sentence.
So each word is like a dancer, changing outfits and moves to match its partner.
Exactly.
Love it. And what about those derivations you were saying?
Derivations, those are like word Legos. We use prefixes and suffixes to build new meanings.
Okay, so like adding lateness to happy, to create happiness.
Exactly. Latvian loves playing with those building blocks, you see. It can express really subtle nuances.
Okay, I'm starting to get it, but 7 cases, honestly, that's a lot for my brain to juggle.
It's a workout, that's for sure. But that's part of what makes Latvian so expressive.
Okay, I'm listening.
Each case gives a noun a slightly different shade of meaning depending on its role in the sentence.
So it's not just what you're saying, it's how you're saying it. All thanks to those cases.
Exactly.
Wow. Now, enough about grammar. Let's talk sounds. What's up with those diacritics I keep hearing about? Are they as tricky as they look?
They might look a bit intimidating at first glance, sure. They're actually quite helpful.
Helpful how?
They indicate sounds that English just doesn't have.
Okay, so give us an example.
Take the letter C.
Okay, C.
A plain C in Latvian makes a TS sound.
Mm-hmm.
But add that little upside down V on top.
I see.
And voila, you get gi.
Which is, it sounds like chi.
She. Okay, so diacritics are like shortcuts to understanding Latvian pronunciation.
You could say that.
And remind me again about palatalization. What does that mean exactly?
Palatalization, it basically means you're making a sound with your tongue closer to the roof of your mouth.
Like you're saying yes.
Well, kind of. Latvian has a bunch of these palatalized consonants, which sound softer and are often, you guessed it, represented by diacritics.
Makes sense. Latvian seems to have a real love affair with its diacritics.
They're essential to its to his beautifully phonetic spelling system.
Right.
And speaking of variations, did you know Latvian has a variety of dialects as well? Dialects. So even within Latvian, there's a whole world of linguistic diversity.
You could say that. There are three main dialects: Livonian, Middle, and Upper Latvian, each with its own, shall we say, its own character.
Fascinating. Tell us more. What makes each one unique?
Well, Livonian Latvian, which is sadly declining, it carries, how should I put it, whispers of the almost extinct Livonian language.
Oh, wow.
Unique intonations, a slightly simplified grammar.
It's always bittersweet when a dialect fades away, like losing a piece of history.
It really is.
What about Middle Latvian?
Middle Latvian's the star of the show, really. It forms the basis of Standard Latvian.
Ah, so the dialect that made it to the big leagues. What about Upper Latvian?
Upper Latvian is, well, it's spoken in Eastern Latvia, known for its, I'd say, distinct sounds.
Distinct how?
And it's even home to the Latgalian language, which is really a standardized form of one of its varieties.
A language within a dialect. Latvian is full of surprises. We've covered so much ground today, from its ancient origins to its intricate grammar and even its unique dialects. It's been quite a journey.
It really has.
Any final thoughts for our listeners? Something to leave them with that aha moment?
Well, I think every language, not just Latvian, is it's a testament to human creativity, really.
I love that.
It's a tapestry woven from, generations of stories, struggles, triumphs.
Beautifully said.
As you encounter different languages, take a moment to, appreciate their beauty, their structure, their music. You might be surprised by what you discover.
I couldn't agree more. And remember, listeners, whether it's Latvian or any other language that, that sparks your curiosity, it's never too late to embark on your own linguistic adventure. Happy exploring.